exactly starting, but yeah, okay. So I would be really curious to see what a translation looks like because some of this stuff, I mean, it's intentionally, uh, I don't know, it can be a lot of it can be interpreted in all different ways. And when you're translating, you're taking sometimes a bit of a leap of faith. Um, and you may lose or gain some
Hi.
new meaning. Hello, hello. We were just kind of chatting to get started here. So yeah, like for example, towards the beginning, there's that talk about the Tupperware party. And if you were just to translate that into Serbian, it wouldn't make sense to say Tupperware party. It might make more sense to say a kind of plastic dish selling gathering. But then, even still, there are all kinds of connotations with Tupperware party that have to do with uh, middle class American housewives. And so it has all these attachments to it that are not translatable. I mean, not without a huge footnote. And I guess that somebody translating this book into Serbian would have to make a lot of use of footnotes to try to maintain some of the texture. But some of the stuff, like I said, I mean, it's ambiguous. It's intentionally ambiguous. You're supposed to be kind of caught out in uh, in the state, kind of like Oedipa is in, where you're trying to
But
figure
I
out what's
think
going on.
it applies to all translations.
Hello.
Everything is
That's
very
true. Yeah,
difficult to translate
that's true. But
because I have read the book uh, The Bridge on the River Drina in English.
uh-huh.
Well, the translation could be better, but it's not it.
Yeah,
It does not convey the
yeah.
feeling, the atmosphere, and it's simply impossible.
And you know, I mean, it's especially interesting in this case because that's kind of what communication entropy is, right? So really what we're talking about is communication entropy when we talk about how you would translate some of this stuff, because something is certainly going to be lost. In a way, something's lost even just by speaking the words out loud in the language they were written in. I mean, okay, maybe not. I don't know. But
And the
like
book by itself is very intriguing, really.
the
Is
what?
there a translate of this
It's
book?
very intriguing.
That's what we
The
were
book
just
is very
talking about,
intriguing.
Yelena. We were just talking about how some of this stuff would be translated and the problem of how it's intentionally ambiguous a lot of the time and uses an extremely baroque sentence structure, very flowery sentence structure. Sometimes you get a sentence that is like an entire paragraph and it's got so much packed up into it that, I mean, there have been several times that I've asked myself, how would this be said in Serbian? Because, you know, I've been here for a while. My Serbian's okay. So, you know, the thought crosses my mind sometimes. And I realize that it's just, and I know that some people have been looking at a translation of this. I'm pretty sure there is one around somewhere. But yeah, it's tough. And sorry, did somebody say something? Oh.
But you want to say that when we are try to read parallel versions, Serbian English, we were lost in some imaginable world like Oedipa, and to become to imagine some other post office service to help us in some kind of third version of
Well, you know,
the.
it's interesting because it's not just, you know, okay, you know, language is a living thing. It changes over time. So it's not just that you would have to translate this in various ways to different languages, but I would even have to translate this in English to a person from a younger generation from me. Because just like terms have changed, some of them don't exist anymore. Some of them are pop culture references um, from a specific time period. And again, that's true of any translation, but you're going to find that that's literally what this book is about in a lot of ways, especially in this final chapter. There are some discussions about being devoted to the word and being devoted to the spirit of a writing. So, do you know, Driblet is said to be devoted to the spirit of the play. He touched the mind of the author, sort of, is kind of how it's, they don't use those exact words, but whereas Bortz, the professor, and his students are devoted to the word. Like they want to make sure the word is right. They say the word is all there is. And there's nothing else you can get at because the author's dead. So it's really kind of what we're talking about here, because if you're translating, you certainly can't translate the spirit of the work, right? In fact, the spirit of the work is also a living thing that will be different to different people who read it, and that's just unavoidable, and it's good. Right?
Hi, Jason.
Hey, how's it going, Vasily? We were just having a little chat waiting for you guys to get here, and I guess we'll get started. But yeah, this stuff is going to come up a lot. There's a lot to talk about in this chapter. Obviously, you know, it's the final chapter, so you would expect for there to be quite a bit going on here. So let's go ahead and get started. Chapter 6. Yes, I have changed the number this time. Really on the ball.
Excuse me, so sorry
yes.
for interrupting you, but can we just make an agreement that we all shut off our microphones, because I constantly hear some background noise. Perhaps it's due to my phone, so I apologize if people turned off, I mean, muted themselves, but I heard the dog barking and something like that. And
yeah, I think I heard a dog barking too.
Yeah, so it's not that, you know, I'm
barking. I can't hear door barking.
Well, there was a dog, but never mind. Yeah, just
okay. No, we all of us will mute the mic.
Yeah. Just until you have something to say. It works better that way. Okay, so in the opening of the final chapter, she gets back to the hotel. She finds the gang, the paranoids, sitting around the diving board, being miserable for the poor fate of Serge. By the way, Miles, Dean, Serge, and Leonard. You guys have any guesses what those are referring to? I mean, you could probably guess. Miles Davis, Dean Martin, but Dean Martin would be kind of out of place because he was one of, you know, Frank Sinatra's Rat Pack, you know, so he was a crooner kind of singer, completely out of these categories. Miles Davis, of course, is the famous jazz musician, trumpet player, and genius. Serge, it's got to be Serge Gainsbourg, who was even big in the U.S. in the '60s. Of course, you guys know the French songwriter. And Leonard, my bet is on Leonard Cohen, who was actually getting big at that time. Anyway, so yeah, it turns out that Serge's girlfriend and Metzger have run off together to get married. So, you know, Metzger is much older than this girl. Serge sings a song, which I'm not going to reprint here. But it's funny because Oedipa's reaction to the song is, "You're trying to tell me something." She's losing her desire, if not her ability, to make any kind of deep inferences about what's happening. She's tired of decoding things. She said, "Look, just tell me what happened. Stop singing." So they give it to her in prose, in other words, in regular speech. Yeah, Metzger and Serge's chick had run off to Nevada. Yes, it's Nevada, not Nevada, to get married. So Serge is very upset about this. She, after getting back to the hotel and unpacking, she gets on the phone with Driblet. An elderly lady answers. "I'm sorry, we've nothing to say," she says. "Well, who's this?" Sigh. "This is his mother. There'll be a statement at noon tomorrow. Our lawyer will read it. She hung up. Now what the hell? What had happened to Gerblette? So, Gerblette is gone, apparently. His mother says there will be a statement at noon. She has no idea what this means. Again, she's being asked to figure out what the hell's going on. She tracks down Professor Bortz. So Professor Bortz, if you'll recall, is the next one on the chain of writers. He's a professor of English, if I remember correctly, teaching at San Narciso College, who she found mentioned in that other copy of the plays. So she finds his number, calls up the wife, Grace, answers the phone. She can hear children in the background. She says he's pouring a patio. It's a highly organized joke that's been going on since about April. He sits in the sun, drinks beer with students, lobs beer bottles at seagulls. You better talk to him before it gets that far. Okay, so she's got a lead on her investigation. She can try to figure out. Remember, her goal with this part is to figure out how Tristero got mentioned in the play. So as she's driving over there, she passes by the used book place, and it's been burned down. It's gone. There's a pile of charred rubble where the book had only been a week ago, standing there. There was still the smell of burnt leather. I guess he had a lot of leather-bound books. She stopped and went into the government surplus outlet next door. This guy's quite the character. The owner informed her that Zap had set fire to his store for the insurance. Okay, that's a possible story. The thing is, the government surplus store guy is a huge racist and really just a kind of despicable character who immediately starts telling her how you can make a buck by figuring out what people want and then selling that thing used. For him this season, it was rifles. So he got 200 rifles for this fellow who was just in this forenoon for his drill team. I could have sold him 200 of the swastika armbands too, only I was short, damn it. So he didn't have enough. He needed more. So whatever drill team came in there bought rifles and swastika armbands. So it's like they're arming a little Nazi militia somewhere. And this is at the government surplus store, which these are real things. They're kind of interesting to stop into. There was one near my parents' house in Florida, and you could go in there for, you know, military stuff like boots and jackets. And I guess if you really wanted to do the kind of Nazi skinhead look, that would be the place to go. So having swastikas there would be a great convenience to any local white supremacist. The guy also...
What is swastika armbands?
Swastika is the Nazi symbol from the Nazi flag. I mean, it's an older symbol that goes back thousands of years, actually. It was quite in vogue at the time that it was appropriated by the Nazis. It was used by other groups too, other political groups. But it's most recognized today as the symbol of Nazism.
But it was like in mirror, not the same.
Yes, it's not the same.
Right, it is reversed. That's correct.
The opposite direction are those crosses.
Yes. Yeah, there's another word for it. I can't remember it off the top of my head, though. It's some kind of cross. So yeah, this guy was selling swastika armbands and rifles to some kind of team of people. He says, listen, now we're getting up an arrangement with one of the big ready-to-wear outfits in LA to see how SS uniforms go for the fall. So he's going all in on this highly profitable arrangement. Now, this harkens back to the whole idea of how everything think back to the skulls, right? How everything gets just kind of transmuted into profit. There's nothing sacred at all, right? The skulls well, they're in the way of the highway. The highway is going to be profitable. I mean, the bones, not the skulls. So they pull the bones out of the ground. And what are we going to do with the bones? Well, we sell them to this development so that people can scuba dive next to them and have things to look at. We turn them into ink. Like, we do all kinds of things. Everything has to be translated back into profit. This guy is realizing the profit of selling swastikas. And then SS uniforms, when it says one of the big ready-to-wear outfits, outfit here doesn't mean clothing. That means company. One of the big ready-to-wear companies in Los Angeles. They're interested in some SS uniforms. We're working in with the back to school campaign. So they're going to have them for kids going back to school. A lot of 37 longs, you know, teenage kid sizes. Next season, we may go all the way and get out a modified version for the ladies. All right. The whole family will be accommodated with SS uniforms. How would that strike you? She says, I'll let you know. She has a way of shutting people down, you know, like this is maybe the only guy that doesn't try to sleep with her, but he tries to sell her Nazi stuff. And she says, okay, well, bye. She leaves, wondering if she should have called him something or tried to hit him with any of a dozen surplus heavy blunt objects in easy reach. There have been no witnesses. It's funny, in the car on the way out, she's like, why didn't I beat that guy? Yeah, there were no witnesses. I could have done it. Anyway, so she goes on. She makes it to Professor Emery Bortz's house. She meets Grace at the door. Come on in, with a wet washcloth. She started to clean off her child's face. How did you manage to get away from yours today? I don't have any. Your children, in other words. I don't have any. Grace looked surprised. There's a certain harassed style, she said. You get to recognize it. I thought only kids caused it. Kids caused it. I guess not. So apparently, Oedipa looks stressed out. It's mentioned in another place in this chapter as well. She looks like she's been through the ringer. She looks like she's been through the war, as they say. She goes to meet the professor. She says, I'd like to find out something about the historical Warfinger. That's the playwright, if you remember. Not so much the verbal one. Okay, so she wants to know historical, let's say, biographical information about the playwright. She's not so interested in the words. The response of these graduate students, the historical Shakespeare, the historical Marx, the historical Jesus. He's right, said shrugged Bortz. They're dead. What's left? Words. Pick some words, said Bortz. We can talk about them. So I don't know if you guys recognize the professor that I've chosen the picture of. It's Jacques Derrida, who is, I don't know, perhaps most famous for saying that the author is dead, and all we have is the words. And he's famously difficult to understand, and we're not going to get too much into him, but let it suffice to say that this is entirely kind of his brainchild, to say that the words are all that are left. The author doesn't have a claim on what they're supposed to mean. In a way, the words belong to the world as soon as they're out there, right? And you can't control the meaning of a writing for all of history forever. It's going to pass on and be interpreted differently by different generations of people, which is what we were just talking about at the beginning. And that would be what Derrida means when he says the author is dead. When Derrida says the author is dead, he doesn't even mean it. He means even if the author is alive, the author is dead. Because the words kind of take on their own life, and you can't control the meaning of the words. It's not like the way that we get the meaning of a text is to go and ask the author, hey, what did you mean? I mean, that's one part of it, but it's not the entirety of it. And you can't say, well, all of the meaning that I derived from this book turns out to be wrong because I asked the author and he told me something else. I don't think that's how you would go about really benefiting from and enjoying and growing from literature, right? You don't have the painter explain the painting to you and the author explain the book to you. There's, in a sense, an uncontrollable aspect to the meaning. And that's, once again, a good thing. So yeah, he says, I can't really tell you anything about the historical Warfinger. We can talk about the words. And as I said before, his devotion is to the words, okay? Not the spirit. The spirit of the words, that's something else. Anyway, Bortz tells her that there's a pornographic version of the play hidden in the Vatican. He says, how did you get into the Vatican? When she mentions the line that she had heard in the play and read in the book. Actually, then she shows the book and he says, okay, how did these writers get into the Vatican? She says, what I saw at the Tank Theater wasn't pornographic. Driblet's production? No, I thought it was typically virtuous. He looked sadly past her towards a stretch of sky. He was a peculiarly moral man. He felt hardly any responsibility towards the word. See, this is the thing. Driblet, remember, he wants to get to the heart of the matter. The words are not the thing for him. But to the invisible field surrounding the play, its spirit, he was always intensely faithful. If anyone could have called up for you that historical Warfinger, it would have been him. It would have been Randy Driblet. So again, this is, he says, we can talk about the words, but I can't tell you about the man himself. She's further informed at this point that Driblet is dead. Randy walked into the Pacific 2 nights ago. So that's why what must have been Driblet's mother on the phone said, the lawyer will talk to the press tomorrow. The girl told her finally. Her eyes had been red all along. In his Gennaro suit, that's the, if you recall, that's one of the characters from the play. He went in costume into the ocean. He's dead, and this is a wake. A wake is a funeral, if you guys haven't heard that term before.
Yes. It's Bdenje in Serbian, Bdenje.
Bdenje.
Yeah, it's Finnegan's Wake by Joyce, isn't it?
Yes.
It's the same term, yeah.
Yeah, that's, by the way, I don't know if we've talked about Finnegan's Wake on this, in these sessions before,
You mentioned, I think that you mentioned it in the first session. That's
yeah,
how I remember.
it's another case like, I mean, if you multiply the ambiguity and let's just say sort of, I don't know, it breaks a lot of rules. It's very difficult to read. I've never read it all the way through. The way that you read Finnegan's Wake is you pick out pieces of it and just read a bit at a time and try reading it in different voices in your head, because there's so much stuff hidden in there. And it's a great illustration of what we've been talking about, because it turns out there's much more potentially hidden in there. People still find things, right? James Joyce, he was a polyglot who like lived in all different places. So he included things in there that were coded in sort of like Finnish Yiddish, like just all kinds of stuff, and things that would be that would mean something different if you read them in certain accents, and things that would mean something different if you just looked at it and thought about Latin roots. And then sometimes there were little drawings in the margins of the page. And it's just a wild ride. And it's ostensibly a book about a funeral for this guy Finnegan. But you couldn't possibly read the book and say, I just read a book about a funeral. It's just not possible. And it's gotten to the point that Joyce has been gone for long enough that it's really just beyond question. I mean, I shouldn't say beyond question. It's not possible for us to even interrogate him for whether these things hidden in there are intentional anymore. It kind of eventually loses the point. Like, who cares? Like, people find something like, oh my God, this is written in Swahili. Did he do that on purpose? Is that really the point, though? Whether he did it on purpose, is that the deciding factor? It could be just a cosmic wind that blew and a coincidence, as they say. And that's what's great about it. It's like you're looking into chaos and you're trying to pick out a face in the bush. You're trying to pick out order. And sometimes you get something and sometimes you don't. It's very, very difficult to read. And I don't know if anybody could just read it. Again, that guy I mentioned before, Robert Anton Wilson, he was a Joyce scholar, among other things, who studied that book for many years. And he recommends that the best way to read it is with a group of friends. You should sit around and talk about it and just do like a few pages a night. He said, preferably with some Guinness. Because it's he says the meanings in that book are like wild animals and you have to hunt them in packs. You have to get a pack of friends together and you have to get some spears and hunt down little scraps of meaning. Anyway, so yes, actually, if you go onto Twitter, you can subscribe to, there's a Twitter bot that just reads Finnegan's Wake like a couple lines a day. So if you're on Twitter, you'll get you'll get Finnegan's Wake just kind of read to you. I think
Thank you, but no, no, but rather we will. At least I don't want to get into it that much. I think it's kind of quasi-intellectualism.
It's not though. It's it's certainly not. I mean, it is literary canon. It has an unbelievable brilliance to it. But I mean, I don't know.
Okay,
check it out if you like.
We'll try. I trust you. So maybe one day we try to struggle. I don't know if anybody read it.
Oh, we're not going to do it in this group. It's first of all, it's way too long to get people.
No, it's not for this kind of discussion. Of course.
No. I mean, it would send us screaming into the void eventually. So yeah. Okay, so Driblet has left us, literally just walked into the ocean. She says to herself, they are stripping from me. They are stripping away one by one my men. All of the men are leaving her. I mean, you could argue that she left first as far as her husband is concerned. But it seemed that even in spite of her infidelity, that they had a kind of, I don't know, let's say unique relationship or loose relationship, where it seemed as if they were still, together, I guess. I don't know. And then he kind of really took off though with his LSD use that kind of just changed him into a different person, different entity. And of course, Metzger. So this, in her increasing paranoia, it's easy for her to put this into a context where she says, they are doing this to me. This is being done to me. So in their discussion about the play versus the text, the original texts, she says, but the night I was there, Driblet did use the Vatican lines. He said the word Tristero. Bortz's face didn't change. It was up to him. He was the director and actor, right? But would it be just some whim? So she's wondering if he would just, without consulting anyone for no reason except one that's locked in his brain somewhere, just decide to use that line on that one night. Again, here we go. Is it just a coincidence? Would he just on a whim decide to use those lines? Randy, what was bugging him inside usually somehow or other would have to come outside on stage. So they're saying the stage was just sort of his, it was sort of an arena, not an arena. It was a stage for his personal inner issues, struggles, questions. If something was bugging him, it would come out on stage, says the third grad student. He might have looked at a lot of versions to develop a feel for the spirit of the play. There it is again. Not necessarily the words. And that's how he came across your paperback there with the variation in it. Okay. Then Oedipa concluded something must have happened in his personal life, something that must have changed him drastically that night. Maybe, said Bortz, maybe not. You think a man's mind is a pool table? I hope not, she says. Now, there's actually a lot to that. If you think about what we've been talking about with regard to just, is the mind purely a cause and effect machine? In other words, is there free will, right? Like, oh, a few things happen to you and they cause this, that, and the other thing. And there's really no you in there at all. It's just these pool balls knocking into each other. Laplace's demon, if you recall, that was another philosophical mental experiment. What's the word? Thought experiment that said that if the universe is deterministic and the laws of physics are purely deterministic, then imagine that there was this demon. Again, there's always that thing that knew the location of every particle in the universe and its current state and what it's doing. Then it would be able to see completely to the end of time, everything that would happen. If everything is purely deterministic with no deviations at all. Incidentally, the increases in advancements in quantum physics have kind of shown that there is an uncertainty. But there's another problem that arises there where you kind of wind up in that case saying that if there is free will, it's just kind of a weird random thing. Like there are particles that behave unpredictably, and is that better? Who knows? Bortz explains that it's believed that the pornographic version of the play was created by an ultra-puritanical sect called the Skirvimites. So this is interesting. So the puritanical Skirvimites made this version to make, okay, well, let's read first because I had to wrap my head around this a little bit. Seems quite counterintuitive that an ultra-puritanical sect called the Skirvimites would make a pornographic play. But their belief is, here we go, nothing ever happened by accident. Creation was a vast, intricate machine. But one part of it, their part, incidentally, ran off the will of God. The rest of the people ran off some opposite principle. Something blind, soulless, a brute automatism that led to eternal death. So the Skirvimites, in a sense, they also believe in a purely causal, deterministic world. It's just that there are different movers that start the processes, and they happen to be in the line of processes moved by the will of God, whereas everyone else is moved by just kind of some sort of blind, soulless, mechanistic continuation of life. I imagine Schopenhauer, if you guys are familiar with Arthur Schopenhauer, blind will, just life for the sake of life with no real reason behind it. Anyway, the reason that they would do a dirty version of the play is as a moral example. They weren't fond of the theater. Okay. It was their way of putting the play entirely away from them into hell. What better way to damn it eternally than to change the actual words? Remember that the Puritans were utterly devoted, like literary critics, to the word. So this was their way of, yeah, showing the deep immorality that comes from theatrical productions. Again, with light, vertiginous sense of fluttering out over an abyss, she asked what she'd come there to ask. What was Tristero? Here. So he he pulls out this book. I keep my Warfingeriana. Earlier we had Californiana. So he's just doing this. Pynchon is doing this thing. You know, we said, oh yeah, you know, that's the thing that people, there's Americana, right? So now there's Warfingeriana. He keeps his Warfinger memorabilia and items locked in here so the kids can't get at it. Charles could ask no end of questions I'm too young to cope with yet. The book was titled An Account of the Singular Peregrinations, that's Wanderings, of Dr. Diocletian Blob among the Italians. And then I love this, illuminated with exemplary tales from the true history of that outlandish and fantastical race, the Italians. I mean, this is kind of like Marco Polo, you know, like he went all the way to Italy, that faraway mystical land, that outlandish and fantastical race, the Italians. So it's the story of an Englishman who made it to Italy. Just funny. So in the book, Blob winds up attacked while traveling with a Thurn and Taxis coach across a desolate stretch of country. So he was traveling, right? He's traveling with Thurn and Taxis without warning next to a lake. Sound familiar? The Lake of Piety. They were set upon by a score of black-cloaked riders. Okay, this is that same story, right? The marauders used cudgels, harquebuses, swords, stilettos. At the end, silk handkerchiefs to dispatch those still breathing. All except for Dr. Blob and his servant, who had dissociated themselves from the hassle at the beginning, proclaimed in loud voices that they're British subjects. We're British over here, don't touch us, please. And they even ventured to sing certain of the more improving of our church hymns. So hilariously, they're sitting off to the side saying, we're British, don't kill us, please, and singing British church songs. It's really a Monty Python scene, very much. And this is the same, and notice that this is an echo. It's the same kind of story that happens even when they go to that, what was it called? Pierce's development project with the lake in it. They go to the lake and then those mafia guys come after them, right? I mean, it's the same story. It keeps getting echoed over and over again. Yes, Vasilia.
Also lost guard of Fagio.
Sorry?
They were lost in the lake.
They were lost in the lake. Yes, yeah, they got stuck onto an island that was built into this. Well, I guess the island was where that recreation center was, but yes, yeah. They were there to rest and do whatever, right?
No, if you didn't hear me, I said lost guard of Fagio, which was mentioned.
Oh, yes, that's right. The Lost Guard of Fagio. Fagio, yes. That's right. The Lost Guard of Fagio. So yeah, it was in the play. It was also, it happened to them as well. So yeah, it's echoing over and over again. The leader of the brigands, after collecting the mail sacks, pulled Blob from the coach and addressed him in perfect English. Monsieur, you have witnessed the wrath of Tristero. Know that we're not without mercy. Tell your king and parliament what we've done. Tell them we will prevail, that neither tempest, nor strife, nor fierce beasts, nor the loneliness of the desert, nor yet the illegitimate usurpers of our rightful estate can deter our couriers. Now, this is a play on the U.S. Postal Service actually does have a motto. I don't know if I'm going to get it exactly right, but it is almost like this. It's neither hail, nor snow, nor sleet, nor dark of night will stop the faithful courier from completing his duty. Okay, I might have completely butchered that because I'm just doing it from memory. But this is a reflection of that, the U.S. Postal Service's motto. And it's, I would say, uncharacteristically dramatic for a government office to have a motto like that. So Blob goes out to find out who Tristero is, and people are mostly shutting up about it. They won't tell him anything. But he does eventually find out that Tristero started in response to an inheritance dispute. Okay. So under and away from the Holy Roman Empire, a Calvinist junta had taken power in Brussels. Okay, so these are Calvinists. They're not part of the Holy Roman Empire. They managed to get out from under the control of the Holy Roman Empire. That junta controlled the police, dictated all decisions of the Estates General, threw out many holders of high positions in Brussels. Among these was Leonard I, Baron of Taxis, gentleman of the Emperor's Privy Chamber, and Baron of Buisingen, the hereditary Grand Master of the Post for the Netherlands, the Low Countries, and executor of Thurn and Taxis. Aha. So these guys got tossed out and replaced by Jan Hinkart, Lord of Ohain, loyal adherent of Orange, who is, by the way, I didn't mention him before, but he's the one who's fighting in rebellion against the Holy Roman Empire. So at that point, we meet the man himself, Hernando Joaquin de Tristero y Calavera. The guy, perhaps a madman, perhaps an honest rebel, according to some, only a con artist, in other words, a fraudster. He claimed to be Hinkart's cousin from the Spanish and legitimate branch of the family, and true Lord of Ohain. I guess that would be Ohain. Rightful heir to everything Jan Hinkert then possessed, including his recent appointment as Grand Master. So he claims to be the rightful heir of that title and office and everything. From 1578 until the Holy Roman Empire took it back, Alexander Farnese took Brussels back again. Tristero kept what amounted to a guerrilla war against his cousin, if it was really his cousin. Could be just a slight. Even after Hinkart is dispossessed of his position, Tristero continues his resistance. He styled himself El Desheredado, the disinherited. This is going to be what, well, we're going to see more disinherited coming up. And fashioned a livery would be the, clothing and stuff, of black for his followers, black to symbolize the only thing that truly belonged to them in their exile, the night. Okay. So he's sort of styling himself as a sort of prince of the dispossessed. Soon he had added to his iconography the muted post-horned and dead badger with its 4 feet in the air. Some said the name Taxis came from Italian tasso, badger, meaning referring to hats of badger fur the early Bergamascan couriers wore. He began a Sub Rosa campaign, that's a secret campaign, of obstruction, terror, and depredation along the Thurn and Taxis mail routes. Okay. Yes, Vasile.
El Desheredado. It reminds me, I don't know what it means, but desperado.
Of Desperado.
Yes, and those orange, it was William Orange. William of Orange.
Of Orange. Orange.
Orange.
In France.
In Netherlands.
Oh, in the Netherlands. Why did I think France? I don't know. Yeah, it means the disinherited. So disinherited would be people who have been dispossessed, cast off from, well, eventually we're going to see people cast off from society. If you recall that the waste delivery people were like homeless people. So people who have not found a place and have been essentially cast off, disinherited. So el desheredado is the disinherited. In other words, the outcast. So at Driblet's funeral, she sort of mentally reaches out or down to his spirit in an effort to see what happened to him in the final moments of his life. She just wants some answers, and she can't. She has to think, of course, she's paranoid that he maybe didn't kill himself, that he, was thrown into the ocean. How does anyone know he walked into the Pacific? Was somebody there watching him walk? I mean, you would find out much later, or you were there. And if you found out later, you wouldn't know that he had walked into the ocean. Anyway, that's just my conjecture. She waited for the winged brightness, so like his spirit that she was imagining, to announce its safe arrival, but there was silence. Driblet, she called, a signal echoing down the twisted miles of brain circuitry. Driblet. But as with Maxwell's demon, so now, either she could not communicate or he did not exist. This either or is also going to be a theme at the end of binaries. There's no excluded middle. Or there is, the middle should be excluded. Okay. To find the rest, she had to approach from the Thurn and Taxis side. In other words, she was hearing Blob's story. Now she had to check any official Thurn and Taxis history to see if she could find out anything else. For Emery Bortz, it seemed to turn into a species of cute game. He held, for instance, to a mirror image theory, by which any period of instability for Thurn and Taxis must have its reflection in Tristero's shadow state. So this is just, here's the thing about Emery Bortz. He does a bunch of really strong and specific speculation without any real reason to do so. Do you guys understand what I mean by that? He just postulates that, well, whatever is happening in Thurn and Taxis must be happening in Tristero. That's his mirror image theory, right? There's no reason for that. It's just how he sees it. There's more that he postulates in high specificity. Yes, Vasily.
When he said that mirror image theory, he means when CERN and Taxis was going good, Tristero organization was going bad.
No. That when Thurn and Taxis was unstable, Tristero was unstable. And he gives a story where, because there is recorded history of instability in Thurn and Taxis, that I think I may have, yeah. So here it is. In Thurn and Taxis, according to the official history, private local post services had encroached or, let's say, overtaken or threatened or gained territory. That's good. Gained so much territory on the imperial posts that the two cities shut down their Thurn and Taxis offices. Okay, so see, there was disruption and trouble in Thurn and Taxis. So then Bortz postulates this imaginary character that he seems to have made up from whole cloth, as they say, if you've heard that idiom. He says, there must have then been some militant faction in Tristero proclaiming the great moment was finally here. In other words, hey, look, there's Thurn and Taxis having some difficulty. We should attack now while they're weak. But conservatives inside of Tristero, so this is a funny thing, like there are Tristero conservatives. Like among the assassins, there's a conservative branch of assassins. The conservative opinion of Tristero would care only to continue in opposition the same way we have been. Let's just keep harassing them like we've been for the last 70 years, says the conservative wing of Tristero. But then there's a radical wing of Tristero that says, hey, now's the time to strike. So do you see in Third and Taxis, there's trouble, and then there's trouble in Tristero. That's his mirror image theory. And he even goes so far as to suppose, imagine this guy. I didn't record that whole thing here because it's enough just to say, we can talk about that later. He even supposes, imagine this guy, his name's Conrad. He just makes up a name. And he just imagines the whole dialogue of this guy talking to people in the bar, like, now is the time for us to do this and that. And one person goes, boo. And then one of the barmaids hits him with a beer mug and knocks him out. So he's completely just making up this stuff from I don't know where. Or maybe maybe he knows everything and he's telling some historical information. I don't know. I couldn't figure out if we're supposed to gather that he knows this from anywhere. She does ask him, did you read this somewhere? And he doesn't really give her an answer, a satisfying answer. And with the end of the Holy Roman Empire, the fountainhead of Thurn and Tax's legitimacy, so in other words, they claimed their legitimacy because of the Holy Roman Empire, is lost forever among other splendid delusions. Possibilities for paranoia become abundant. If Tristero has managed to maintain even partial secrecy, because remember, they managed to keep their existence secret up until like the 17th century or 18th century, something like that. If Thurn and Taxis do not know really who their enemy is, or how big they are, how far their influence extends, then many of them must come to believe in something very like the Scurvomite's blind automatic anti-god, right? There's this thing out there that's just a blind will that leads to eternal death. Whatever it is, it has the power to murder their riders, send landslides thundering across their roads, by extension bring into being a new local competition and presently even state postal monopolies, disintegrate their empire. It's their time's ghost. So it's like their boogeyman, the Tristero, their time's ghost, out to put the Thurn and Taxis ass in a sling. Ass in a sling is an idiom that means to give them a really hard time. Okay. But over the next century and a half, the paranoia recedes. So they start to see Tristero as, oh, these are just some guys in black suits. That's the secular Tristero. Oh, this isn't some mystical, magical force of wizards or something, monsters. This isn't some, what was it, Scurvamian anti-god? No, these are just people. But they display power, omniscience, implacable malice. In other words, they are mean as heck, implacably mean. In other words, they cannot be satisfied. They cannot be made peaceful. Attributes of what they thought to be a historical principle, a zeitgeist, are carried over to the now human enemy. So in other words, they translate all of those fears from this sort of mythical, monstrous organization into sort of human, but still powerful enemy. So much that by 1795, it's even suggested that Tristero has staged the entire French Revolution just for an excuse to issue the proclamation of the Ninth Frimar. I guess this would be Article 3, ratifying the end of Thurn and Taxis postal monopoly. Remember, that's also the theory that Fallopian has, that he thinks that the Civil War was just there perhaps to squash a bunch of private postal services. I see someone in the chat here. Oh, bye, Vina. But yeah, if you recall, that's what Fallopian was saying. He was saying that he thought the Civil War might have just been there to squash competition amongst postal carriers. Very strange. But again, it echoes what was already said. Oedipa returns to the scope to find Mike Fallopian naturally. He suggests to her, has it ever occurred to you that somebody's putting you on? That means it's all a big joke against you. This, by the way, is what a true paranoiac struggles with. Like, I am being attacked by everyone. This is all planned against me. It remains questionable whether that would be an improvement in the situation. Oh, maybe everyone is attacking me in this extremely complex prank that has to involve huge sums of money and actors and all kinds of stuff. Is that preferable to there being a secret shadowy organization? An open question. Has it ever occurred to you that someone's tricking you? This is all a hoax, maybe something Inverarity set up before he died. It had occurred to her, she had thought of it, but like the thought that someday she would have to die, Oedipa refused to look at the possibility directly, or in any but the most accidental of lights. No, that's ridiculous. Fallopian watched her, nothing if not compassionate. You really ought to think about it. Write down what you can't deny, your hard intelligence, but then write down what you've only speculated, assumed. See what you've got. So he's telling her to organize her thoughts, basically. Figure out what is definitely true that you can't deny, make that into a list, and then you have to look really hard at what you have speculated and you don't know for sure. Unfortunately, she's in such a state that it's really hard to say that she knows anything. She takes his explanations as a kind of dismissal. I've even skipped a few lines here, but she feels like he's lying to her. She stands up, wondering if her hair is in place, if she looked rejected or hysterical, if they'd been causing a scene. I knew you'd be different, she said, Mike, because everyone's been changing, but it hasn't gone as far as hating me. So she's accusing him of hating her. Hating you? He shakes his head and laughs. She says, if you need any armbands or more weapons, do try Winthrop Tremaine over by the freeway. Tremaine's Swastika shop. Mention my name. He says we're already in touch. So he's already been there. Maybe he's the one who was buying the rifles. Who knows? And swastikas. So she feels like she doesn't have many more people to talk to. What about her sources? She was avoiding the question, yes. One day, Genghis Cohen called, sounding excited. He said, come look at what we've got. It turns out to be an old stamp with the symbol of the muted post horn, the belly up badger, and the motto, we await silent Tristero's empire. Ah, that's what WASTE stands for. So we finally get the acronym. Odd. He couldn't find the stamp listed, but here it is, an addendum, look. So he's looking at this sort of dictionary or index of stamps. So, you know, they make these indexes. This one's called the Scott Index or something like that. In the front of the book, a slip of paper had been pasted in. Okay, so the book has been physically modified with this addendum with that stamp. Designated 163L1 was reproduced under the title Tristero Rapid Post, San Francisco. Should have been inserted between these other listings. So Oedipa, in a kind of intuitive high, went immediately to the end paper in the back and found the sticker of Zaff's used books. So the stamp in the index entry has been pasted into there physically. Okay, you think about what that means, or could mean. That could mean that this is all a big joke. The stamp is not even in the book officially. Someone pasted it in there with some, you know, adhesive, like glue or something. And then when she looks in the back of the book itself, it comes from the bookstore that she's been going to, right? That burned down suspiciously. So this leaves the door open for everything to be a plot, everything to be a hoax. And of course, that whole shopping center had been owned by Pierce. So Pierce is connected to everything. Also the theater where she saw the play. He owned that too. Okay, it's unavoidable, isn't it? Every access route to the Tristero, in other words, all of her information, could be traced back to the Inverarity estate in some way. Even Emily Bortz, with his copy of Blobb's Peregrinations, bought also at Zapp's. Getting that. Oh, the game. Yeah. Wow. That's a deep cut. I remember that movie. I'm old enough to have seen that movie in theaters when it came out. I might not look it, but I actually did see that movie in theaters. I mean, I'm trying to think. There are other movies with that kind of theme of everything being put on, you know, plotted. There's the Truman Show, although that's quite a bit more. Why? I don't even know if you would say it's lighthearted in the end. What are some others? There are plenty. I don't know about plenty, but there are several instances of films like that. Oops, hang on a sec. There we go. Where was I? Oh yes. Okay. So Bott, she had no doubt he'd tell her in the event she asked. Also at Zapp's, so she supposes the book was bought there too. Taught now at San Narciso College, which is endowed by Pierce. In other words, the college receives its funding from Pierce's businesses, from his estate. So Pierce is connected to everything. Either, and here's where we start getting this either or thing, right? Either you have stumbled without the aid of LSD or other indole alkaloids onto a secret richness and concealed density of dream, onto a network by which some Americans are truly communicating while preserving their lies, recitations of routine, arid betrayals of spiritual poverty for the official government delivery system. In other words, there really is a secret network of underground postal service. Maybe even onto a real alternative. Excuse me. A real alternative to the exitlessness, to the absence of surprise to life that harrows the head of every American you know, and you too, sweetie, she says to herself. Or you're hallucinating it. So that's the first either or. Either there really is this Tristero, or you're hallucinating it. And there's another either or, because there are 4 parts in total. Or there's a plot against you, this huge hoax with actors and special effects, sailors with tattoos and, you know, all of the trappings, you know, by special effects, yeah, you could say that, you know, they put the waste canister down there under the highway, like practical special effects. Planting post-horn images all over San Francisco, bribing librarians, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or you're fantasying, not fantasizing, he says fantasying, some such plot, in which case you are a nut out of your skull. So that's the other possibility, either or. It's either there's a plot against you or you're hallucinating a plot against you. So that's this quaternity, right? The 4 parts. The first one is either there's a Tristero or you're hallucinating it. And the second one is either there's a plot against you or you're hallucinating it. She's not happy with any of those alternatives. Those symmetrical 4. She didn't like any of them, but hoped she was mentally ill. It's really a sad day when you say, okay, hopefully I'm just mentally ill. That would be maybe treatable, right? But the existence of shadowy, potentially violent organizations is not treatable by medication. She reads an article, and I've just put the ending here, that gives her some further history. Thus, the article smugly concluded, did the Tristero organization enter the penumbra. That's the under the shadow. Umbra is shadow. That's where umbrella comes from. Of historical eclipse. From the Battle of Austerlitz until the difficulties of 1848, the Tristero drifted on, deprived of nearly all noble patronage that had sustained them. Now reduced to handling anarchist correspondence. That's kind of funny. That was also, remember, Toth, the old man, mentioned anarchists. They came up before. Actually, Bakunin came up before too. Yeah, in that same conversation. Then he drifted off talking about a Porky Pig cartoon with an anarchist bomb maker. The Big Bang, it was called, something like that. Anyway, so yeah, apparently they're no longer doing deliveries for royal houses. Now they're just delivering for some anarchists. Only peripherally engaged. In Germany with the ill-fated Frankfurt Assembly, in Budapest at the barricades, perhaps even among the watchmakers of the Jura, preparing them for the coming of Bakunin. Bakunin, if you didn't know, is one of the central figures of anarchy as a movement, conquest of bread and all that. By far the greatest number, however, fled to America during 1849, 1850, where they are no doubt at present rendering their services to those who seek to extinguish the flame of revolution. All the Tristero refugees from the 1849 reaction arrive in America. It seemed to him full of high hopes. Only what do they find? Not really asking. He's not really asking. It's a rhetorical question. He just says trouble. Around 1845, the US government had carried out the great postal reform, cutting their rates, putting most independent mail routes out of business. This is what Fallopian was saying. By the mid-70s and 80s, any independent carrier was immediately squashed. Yes, Vasilia?
Also, there was some from Mexico, some anarchists mentioned.
And oh yeah, that's right. The Flores brothers. Flores, I can't remember the second last name. They often have the two last names.
And those Oedipa meet some anarchists.
Yes. You're right. When she's doing her drift, when Oedipa is doing her drift through the city, she runs into an old acquaintance that they met in Mexico. And yes, he's an anarchist. That's right. He talks about the anarchist miracle of basically anarchist movements being able to just suddenly spontaneously organize. That would be the anarchist miracle. And then she experiences an anarchist miracle when she goes into the ball to dance with the deaf, mute people who are all dancing to their own music in their head, and no one collides. So yes, the Tristero basically during that period is somewhat defanged, declawed. So they simply stay on. In context of the conspiracy, other immigrants come to America looking for freedom from tyranny, acceptance by the culture, assimilation into it, this melting pot. Civil War comes along. Most of them being liberals sign up to fight for the Union, but not Tristero. Okay. All they've done is to change oppositions. So Tristero here kind of converts to being agents of chaos, something like that. By 1861, they're well established, not about to be suppressed. While the Pony Express is defying deserts, savages, and sidewinders, that's a type of snake, Tristero's giving its employees crash courses in Siouan and Athapascan dialects. Those are Native Indians, Native Americans. In other words, they're teaching them to speak and pretend to be Indians, if you recall from the story, to pretend to be Native Americans, I should say. One day, Cohen called to tell her the final arrangements had been made to auction off the stamp collection. Okay. I don't know. I feel like Cohen knows more that he could be. I mean, he could be a part of the Tristero because he's feeding her all this information. And maybe he just gets some kind of sick pleasure out of watching her suffer. So yeah, there's going to be the estate auction where the stamp collection will be lot 49, as we talked about. This is what the crying is. The Tristero forgeries were to be sold as lot 49. And something disturbing, a new bidder. So a bidder is a person who's putting some money up to try to buy at the auction. A new bidder has appeared on the scene, whom neither I nor any of the firms in the area have heard of before. That hardly ever happens. So a mysterious new figure is showing up to bid on lot 49. Oedipa goes back, and this, in our final session, I really am gonna read these last pages again because there's so much in her internal musing to think about. And one of the things that I think we should talk about next time is this idea of Inverarity's real legacy to her is America. We'll get to that in a second, though. So she goes back to the hotel to drink. She goes out to drive on the freeway after drinking with her lights out to see what would happen. But angels were watching. So she's really a wreck. I mean, she's just, it's like half-heartedly, it's like saying, if the universe will kill me now, then it will. It's almost suicide, but not quite. It's an invitation to suicide. She finds a payphone and she calls the Greek Way, if you recall the gay bar from way back, to track down that tour guide. She figures maybe I can track down that guy. So she calls the place. And what do you know? By the way, this is a famous phone booth. It's out in the Mojave Desert. It's apparently still there. And it's extremely old and it's extremely in the middle of nowhere. I guess if you're lost in the desert, then you're very happy to see that phone booth. I hope you have a quarter. She manages to get him. He's miraculously there. She gives a false name. This is Arnold Snarb, she says, choking up. Choking up is to say that she's trying not to cry. He says, I was in a little boy's room. The men's room was full. That's a joke. That's actually a joke I've heard people make before, because sometimes people call the men's room the little boy's room, and then that turned into this joke. I was in a little boy's room because the men's room was full. She told him quickly what she'd learned about the Tristero, about what happened to Hilarious, Mucho, Metzger, Driblet, Fallopian. So you are the only one I have, the only one left. I don't know your name. I don't want to, but I have to know whether they arranged it with you. To run it to me by accident. Remember, when she runs into that group, he's a tour guide, and the tourists just kind of sweep her up, right? She gets caught in a sort of tide of tourists. So yeah, she could have been swept up on purpose. She's asking, did you do this? It may be a practical joke for you, but it stopped being one for me a few hours ago. I got drunk and went driving on these freeways. Next time I may have to be more deliberate. For the love of God, human life, whatever you respect, please help me. It sounds like she started to get through to him. Arnold, he said. Then she says, it's over. They've saturated me. Like they've completely washed over her with all of this. From here on, I'll only close them out. You're free, released, you can tell me. It's too late, he says. For me, she asks, and he says, for me. And then he hangs up. So he knows something. And it's like he's considering spilling the beans, but sounds like he's afraid for his life. And it's really interesting. You can read the ending to this story in a few ways. When he says it's too late for me, does he mean that he's already indulged her too much in this phone call, and now he's going to pay a price? Or it's too late to do anything. The dice have rolled. This whole thing is played out. She had dedicated herself weeks ago to making sense of what Inverarity had left behind. And this is the thing, never suspecting that the legacy was America. Now, I really want to parse that, to analyze that in the next session. In what sense did he leave her America? What does that mean? We're going to talk, we don't have to answer right now, but it's something to really think on. Because what did she, like, I can give an example. What did she get? Well, she got exposure to the disenfranchised, to this underside of the world, to this underside of the country. That's one way of thinking about it. What else did she get? She got insanely paranoid. That's what else she got. She remembered now old Pullman cars. Those are train carts. Left where money had run out for customers, vanished amid green farm flatnesses where clothes hung. These are those really long sentences. I want to read through them again because there's so much in there. Where clothes hung, smoke lazed out of jointed pipes. Whereas squatters there, squatters are basically people who are living in those train cars illegally. Squatters there in touch with others through Tristero. Were they helping carry forward that 300 years of the house's disinheritance? In other words, maybe these dispossessed people are the ones using Tristero. And the implication is interesting because, remember, it's said that the communications in the underground post are honest. Honest to the point of even being perhaps criminal or despicable, but away from the eyes of the world of order, which we would represent in the past as Thurn and Taxis is the world of order, the Holy Roman Empire. That's the ordered world. But there's this underside that's chaotic, and it's chaotic, but it's real. And that's, well, we can think about that more. So are these squatters using Tristero with using that, these honest communications? Surely they'd forgotten by now that it was Tristero, that it was the Tristero were to have inherited. Let me just read that sentence again because I've botched it. Surely they had forgotten by now what it was the Tristero were to have inherited. Okay. As perhaps Oedipa one day might have. What was left to inherit? What was left to inherit? It's a good question. Because Tristero, they went through changes themselves. May have even started off as the whim of a con man. That America coded in Inverarity's testament, there it is again. In Inverarity's will is coded America. That's, again, that's the thing that she's inheriting. Whose was that? She thought of other immobilized freight cars. Again, those are train cars, where the kids sat on the floor planking, not the verb planking from the modern, not the neologism planking, which is a thing that the kids were doing a few years back where they would just make themselves stiff as a board and take pictures to put on the internet. No, this is the noun planking, as in the plank floor. The floor planking. and sang back, happy as fat. That's an interesting phrase. Whatever came over the mother's pocket radio. Of other squatters who stretched canvas for lean-tos. Lean-tos would be makeshift tents, right? Made out of, in this case, canvas, behind smiling billboards all along the highways, or slept in junkyards in the stripped shells of wrecked Plymouths, that's a car, or even daring, spent the night up some pole in a lineman's tent, like caterpillars. This is a kind of tent that hangs. You may have seen people using them in mountain climbing. It's a kind of tent that you can hang from a tree or anything really that you can get a good grip on to keep yourself off the ground. Spent the night in some lineman's tent like caterpillars, swung among a web of telephone wires, living in the very copper rigging and secular miracle of communication, untroubled by the dumb voltages flickering their miles the night long and the thousands of unheard messages. These are all the things that she's thinking about. This is really her dark night of the soul. She had heard all about excluded middles. Excluded middle is, you've maybe heard, okay, there's the law of identity. The law of identity in, like, this is going back to Aristotle and Plato, like A is A. A thing cannot simultaneously be and not be a thing. The law of excluded middles is to say that something either is or is not. So it's a binary. There is no middle. The other one is the law of non-contradiction. That's actually the should, I think, cannot be and not be at the same time. Okay, so anyway, excluded middle is the thing that there is no middle to the binary. They're bad. They should be avoided. How had it ever happened here with the chances once so good for diversity, here being in America? For it was now like walking among the matrices of a great digital computer. The zeros and ones twinned above, like her choice before. The four parts, the four choices that she has are in binary form, right? Hanging like balanced mobiles. A mobile is the thing that hangs over a baby's crib. I'm here also to translate the stuff that you might not have heard a lot of these terms before. Hanging like balanced mobiles, right and left, ahead, thick, maybe endless. Behind the hieroglyphic streets, there would either be a transcendent meaning or just earth. See, it's a binary. In the songs of Miles, Dean, Serge, and Leonard, sang was either some fraction of truth, numinous beauty, so like a religious, spiritual truth, as Mucho now believed, or just a power spectrum, some sort of frequencies played at different intensities. Tremaine, the swastika salesman's reprieve from Holocaust, that's that his store did not burn down, was either an injustice or an absence of wind. The wind just didn't blow the fire to his store. The bones of the general infantry, that's GIs, the bones of the soldiers at the bottom of Lake Inverarity were either there for a reason that mattered to the world or for people to gawk at, for skin divers and cigarette smokers, right? So all of these are either it's meaningful or it's not. Those are the binaries that she's going through in her head. Ones and zeros. The middle is excluded. It can't be both, right? Or can it? Oedipa attends the auction. So here's the final scene of the book. She learns that the bidder will be there instead of calling in. Or actually it wasn't calling in, it was being sent through it sounded like there was a system where the bidder sends in through the mail. These days, though, if you're familiar with auctions, people call in, and if you've ever watched an auction, you'll see that there are a bunch of people on phones off to the side, and they're all taking bids as well. So people are there digitally these days. Here they're auctioning off some memes apparently. Yeah. Have you guys heard about NFTs? I don't want to get into that right now. That's too much. And non-fungible tokens. People are selling. Oh, it's too hard to explain, honestly. It's too much. We'll talk about it if we have time in the last section. But basically, people are selling digital images as if they are originals through an authentication system. And it turns into like wild speculation on what the value will be. And so like people are selling literally a JPEG for $400,000, like insane money. There's more to it.
What? I didn't hear.
They're called NFTs. It's kind of a thing right now. It's a bubble, basically, if you know what an investment speculation bubble is. I mean, it's going to collapse and a bunch of people are going to lose money. It's extremely stupid, but a lot of people are making money off of it right now.
Listen, sorry, but you said someone sold $4,000.
$400,000.
$400,000.
Even more than that. Again, it's hard to explain, partially because it's related to cryptocurrency and how the blockchain works. There's an authentication system that can essentially tell you that the digital image that you're looking at is an original, which is a really bizarre concept for a digital image to be an original, because if you right-click, copy, paste, you have the exact same image, right? But it turns out using blockchain technology, they've established an authentication system. So now you have such a thing as an original digital image. Now, this has led to a huge speculation bubble. So that's what happens when people get enthusiastic about the money that could be made, and a bunch of people start throwing money at things thinking, oh, I can buy this thing. They're called NFTs, non-fungible tokens. Anyway, I can't get into it too much. It's hard to explain, even for me. I would say especially for me right now, because I'm still trying to wrap my head around this book. But NFTs are just a wildly kind of insane thing that's happening right now. And who knows, maybe they'll stick around. I mean, people have been really surprised by how long cryptocurrency has managed to hold itself up in general. But anyway, we're really sidetracking from the book now. So the auction is starting. There are men in the auction room. This is very interesting. Wearing black mohair. So there are men in black with pale, cruel faces at the auction. They watch her come in, trying each to conceal his thoughts. The way that that sentence is put, it's not that she imagined that they're trying to conceal their thoughts. They are trying to conceal their thoughts. Lauren Passerine on his podium, that's the auctioneer, hovered like a puppet master, his eyes bright, his smile practiced and relentless. He stared at her, smiling, as if saying, I'm surprised you actually came. An assistant closed the heavy door on the lobby's windows and the sun. She heard a lock snap shut. The sound echoed a moment. Passerine spread his arms in a gesture that seemed to belong to the priesthood of some remote culture, perhaps to a descending angel. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Oedipus settled back to await the crying of lot 49. So, very dramatic imagery here at the end. What do you think is going to happen to Oedipus? Because it really could be read so many ways, right? I mean, this could be she's being assassinated. Or maybe she's being inducted. Maybe she's going to pass through to the other side and see all of the truth. We don't know. Maybe she's uncovered enough of it that they have to do some sort of induction here in the chat. Sounds really ominous. Yes, it does. When I picture this as a film, I mentioned, you know, David Lynch vibes, but also Stanley Kubrick vibes. Cacophony of high-pitched violins at the end. It could really be filmed as horror if one wanted to do so. Yes, very, very ominous. And indeterminate ending. There's no closure except for that door. That's the third time though that the lights go out on her and she has like revelatory experiences. The first time was with Metzger when the paranoiacs blew the fuse at the hospital, or sorry, at the hotel, and the world was plunged into darkness. And remember what happened when the lights came back on? The movie with young baby Igor comes back on, and they're dying in the scene, right? Like baby Igor doesn't make it. It's a tragic end to the film. That doesn't augur well for this time. The second time the lights go out in Revelation is during the play, that there's a point at which the theater is plunged into darkness after the word Tristero is mentioned. So these times that darkness appears or light disappears. And those are always revelatory moments, right? Where she gets pulled deeper into the web in some respect. So yeah, there's a lot of dark comedy in here, and at the end here, I don't know, like it feels like it doesn't finish as comedy, to say the least. A lot to think about though, and I really want you guys to think about this idea of what she inherited was America, in what sense that's true. I'm not fully decided on it either. Yeah, it's kind of been itching my brain again. All right, so do you guys have some comments or some questions? Yes, Vasilia?
Well, Thomas Pynchon actually he left his readers to think about the ending.
Yes. It's very much in spirit of what, in the spirit again, if not in the word, in the spirit of what is happening in the book. Remember, we're always being asked to question what is happening in this story, in the same way that Oedipa winds up, you know, deeply paranoid and always questioning what is happening, and ultimately comes down to 4 possibilities. Maybe we can come up with 4 paired binary possibilities to what happens after the lights go out in the auction house. Are all of the other people? It doesn't say actually. Are all of the other people in black? Yeah, the men inside the auction room wore black mohair. So that doesn't say that there were some of them. So it's like the entire room. So yeah, it seems like either this is it for her or she's being inducted into the group. It is mentioned at some point that she could even have been harassed into joining Tristero itself. That does get mentioned in this chapter. I didn't put it up here. So yeah, maybe this is it. They're like, you have found us, and now maybe she'll be given a choice. You can join us or not join us. And then she says, not join you. And they say, okay, well, bye. We'll see you later. And that's the end of the story. And then she says, "They said we'll see you later. That's not good." Okay, well, think about it for next time. And if there's something else, are you raising your hand, Slobodonka? I see I'm getting a thumbs up there. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Well, if that's all, then next time we're just going to be, oh, was it something
But
I said?
just
Go ahead.
person. Can you hear me? No.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Can you
Yes.
hear me?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
The name Genghis Khan is associated to Genghis Khan.
Yes.
However, did he come into the story, Genghis Khan, the great Mughal invader?
It's parody with these names. There is
Yeah.
no explain, not need to explain everything.
Yeah, actually, that one I was really
Yeah, but
curious about.
especially that name. I mean, all other names are okay, but no, it's not essential. As I said, it's not essential at all. But just crossed my mind, Genghis Khan.
I accidentally
You're
stumbled.
right. I mean, the whole history came into the.
I accidentally stumbled across a story about that because there was another author who said,
Oh,
"Hey, I came up with that name, Genghis Cohen," and then Thomas Pynchon was like, "Look, I didn't mean anything. It's just a joke. Like he had no meaning behind that one. He just thought it was funny." Because the guy is also a philatelist. He's a stamp collector, and has this warlord's name. Yes, Vasilia.
yes. Yeah.
And there is
Name hilarious. It reminds on Mad Men.
Of Mad Men, the television show.
No, hilarious.
Hilarious. Yeah, yeah. He's definitely a madman. he's
and
he's a mad scientist, literally. I mean, if you okay, he starts off as kind of a somewhat funny mad scientist, but still not funny. But then you find out the truth about him, and he's a real mad scientist, literally experimenting on human beings in a concentration camp. So, like, the absolute most horrible thing you can imagine is Dr. Hilarious. It's a world of contrasts in this book.
and there is also a name Winthrop Tremaine, a combination of two person, real person.
Yeah.
One is John Tremaine, who is a Puritan and who came to America in 17th century.
Yeah.
The other is Tremaine, is fictional hero for children.
There's also the Puritan, he prosecuted the Quakers. That was his big thing because these like ultra Puritans came to the US and of course trying to escape prosecution and then end up prosecuting other people. Persecution, not prosecution, sorry. The other name is related to one of the rich families, but I can't remember. One of the old money families in the US.
This Tremaine, fictional hero for children.
Hang on a sec. I'm trying to think of who the other one was. Just one sec. I can kind of check really quick here.
From American Revolution in that time was those books.
I'll have to look it up for next time, but let's see.
I was Googling and found that.
Oh, hang on one sec here. Oops.
It's the book about American Revolution. And
so the Winthrops, hang on one sec. Yeah, was one of the first American families that came over on the Mayflower. So one of the pilgrim ship families. They were the Winthrops. There is also, hang on, let's see. Yeah, we'll talk about that later, actually. But yes, you're right. I mean, there are lots of connections you can make. That's the thing.
And this two-person shows the discrepancy between America claimed to be and what is actually is.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
On that.
Yeah, I mean, that's, again, there's this binary.
It's some kind of satire.
Satire, yes.
Satire, yes.
Okay. So next time, yes, Vasile?
There is also a movie with some guy, Winter, with Eddie Murphy.
With Eddie Murphy, Winthrop. I can't remember which one it is. Is it an old movie?
I think that is called.
What is it?
Well, I'll check now.
I mean, I'm sure Thomas Pynchon was not referring to Eddie Murphy. Thomas Pynchon wrote this book in 1967.
Yes,
I think that's about.
But it reminded me on.
Yeah. Yes, Yelena? Ah, I thought you were raising your hand. Okay. Oh, I'm getting a chat. Let's see. Thank you, Jovana. So yeah, next week we're gonna just have general discussion and we'll try to hash out some of the themes of the book. And we'll try to stay on topic. We'll do our best. Okay.
The book is very interesting for discussion. Thank you for choosing this book.
Thank you. I actually didn't choose this one. This was voted in, but
you choose 10 books and this was one of them.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I wanted to pick some books. I had to pick some books that were relatively short so that we would not have to have the group last for 6 months. Because then people would definitely quit. Yeah. I'm really glad to have done this book too. I hadn't read this before, so it's been a lot to chew on. Okay, guys. I am going to make some dinner. I'll see you guys next
Enjoy your
time.
dinner.
Very nice time with you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.